Rowan Whitaker thought he was having a perfect evening. The restaurant sat in one of Charlotte's busiest upscale districts, filled with soft conversation, polished glass, and people enjoying expensive dinners after long work weeks. Across from him sat Brielle Hart. She smiled as she lifted her wine glass. Rowan smiled back. To everyone nearby, they looked like an ordinary couple sharing another pleasant night together. Nobody at neighboring tables knew that Rowan had a wife waiting at home. Nobody knew he had spent nearly a year living a double life. And nobody knew that his carefully protected secret was about to collapse in front of him. Brielle laughed at something he said. Rowan relaxed deeper into his chair. For the first time all week, he felt comfortable. No pressure, no difficult questions, no responsibilities demanding his attention. Just dinner, just conversation, just another evening he believed he controlled. A waiter appeared beside their table, professional, calm, holding a sealed envelope. "Good evening, sir," the waiter said politely. "This was left for you." Rowan frowned slightly. "For me?" "Yes, sir." The waiter placed the envelope beside his plate and quietly stepped away. Rowan looked down. No company logo, no restaurant branding, no return name, just a plain envelope. Brielle glanced at it. "That's strange." "Probably work-related." Rowan picked it up casually. At that moment, he had no reason to be nervous. No reason to worry, no reason to believe that the next few seconds would change everything. He opened the envelope, pulled out several pages, looked at the first page. His smile vanished instantly. The color drained from his face. His breathing stopped. For a moment, he simply stared, unable to process what he was seeing. Divorce papers, official, signed, prepared, real. Brielle leaned forward. "What is it?" Rowan didn't answer. His eyes moved across the page, then across another, then another. Each document confirmed the same reality. His marriage was over, not threatened, not in danger. Over. His hands began trembling. "Rowan?" Brielle's voice sounded distant, almost impossible to hear, because attached to the legal documents was a handwritten note. Only one short message. A message that hit harder than every page inside the envelope. "You spent months choosing deception. Tonight, I choose honesty. The rest of my life begins now." Rowan knew exactly who wrote it. His stomach tightened. Slowly, he lifted his head, and that was when he saw her, standing near the entrance. Alora Bennett, his wife, the woman he thought knew nothing, the woman he believed was still waiting for explanations, the woman he assumed would never discover the truth. She wasn't crying, she wasn't shouting, she wasn't creating a scene. She simply stood there, looking directly at him, calm, steady, certain. For a brief moment, the noise inside the restaurant seemed to disappear. 11 years of marriage existed inside that single glance. The first dates, the wedding, the house they bought together, the promises, the memories, the lies, every choice that had led to this moment. Rowan opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because deep down, he already understood something. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't an argument. This wasn't a second chance. This was the consequence of every decision he had made during the past year. Alora gave a small nod, turned around, and walked toward the exit. She never looked back. Rowan remained frozen in his chair, watching the woman he once promised forever disappear through the restaurant doors. Have you ever felt that something wasn't right long before you had proof? Have you ever trusted someone while a quiet voice inside you kept telling you to pay closer attention? Tonight's story is not simply about infidelity. It's about trust. It's about self-respect. It's about the cost of dishonesty. Most importantly, it's about what happens when one person spends months building a secret life, while the other quietly gathers the strength to reclaim their future. Stay with me until the end, because before this story is over, you'll discover how one woman transformed heartbreak into the greatest comeback of her life, and why the man who believed he could keep two worlds separate ended up losing the one that mattered most. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps YouTube recommend stories like this to more people who may need these lessons in their own lives. Welcome back to Mr. Brugman Stories, where powerful stories don't just entertain, they teach life-changing lessons. If you're new to this family, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button because it helps us share stories like this across YouTube. Today, we embark on a new journey, one meant to bring peace, love, and understanding to the world. Thank you for being part of our beautiful family. Your support, your comments, your engagement, they are the reason I continue creating stories that uplift the heart and strengthen the soul. God bless you as you listen to this story. I hope you have a blessed day. Most people who met Alora Bennett and Rowan Whitaker during the first years of their marriage believed they had everything figured out, not because they were wealthy, not because life was easy, because they seemed to move through life as a team. Years before the night that would change everything, Charlotte, North Carolina felt like the perfect place to build a future. The city was growing quickly. New businesses opened every year. Neighborhoods expanded. Families put down roots. Young professionals arrived looking for opportunities. Alora loved Charlotte because it felt connected. You could walk into a grocery store and run into someone you knew. You could attend a church event and leave with 3 invitations to family cookouts. You could face a difficult season and discover that people genuinely cared. That sense of community shaped her long before she met Rowan. Alora grew up in a close-knit black family where privacy rarely lasted longer than a few hours. If someone got promoted, everybody knew. If someone struggled, everybody knew. If someone needed help, everybody showed up. Her mother, Celeste Bennett, spent decades working as a nurse. Long shifts never stopped Celeste from making time for family. Her father, Darnell Bennett, repaired city buses and believed patience solved more problems than anger ever could. Together they taught Alora lessons she carried into adulthood. Show up, keep your word, treat people with respect, and never expect trust without earning it. Those values became the foundation of her life. Rowan's upbringing looked different. His parents lived outside Charlotte in a suburban community where families tended to keep personal matters private. People were friendly. They waved. They exchanged greetings, but they rarely invited neighbors into their personal lives. Rowan learned independence early. He handled problems quietly, worked through challenges alone, asked for help only when absolutely necessary. When Alora and Rowan eventually met, those differences felt refreshing rather than problematic. Their paths crossed during a community financial literacy event. Alora had recently started building her reputation as a financial counselor. She enjoyed helping people understand money without making them feel embarrassed by mistakes. During one workshop session, she noticed a tall man sitting near the back of the room. Unlike many attendees, he listened more than he spoke. That man was Rowan Whitaker. Rowan noticed her too, not because she demanded attention, because she had a way of explaining complicated topics that made people feel comfortable. After the event ended, they exchanged a few words. Nothing dramatic, no instant romance, no magical moment, just a conversation. A few days later, Rowan called. That conversation led to coffee. Coffee led to dinner. Dinner led to weekends together. The relationship developed steadily. Neither person felt pressure to impress the other. Neither tried to become someone they weren't. That honesty created trust. For the first time in years, both felt like they were building something meaningful. 2 years later, Rowan proposed. The proposal was simple. No cameras, no crowd, no social media performance. Just 2 people discussing the future they wanted together. Alora said yes, without hesitation. Their wedding reflected who they were. Family filled the room. Friends celebrated alongside them. Celeste cried. Darnell tried not to cry. Nobody believed those tears would eventually become part of a much larger story. For several years, married life felt exactly how they hoped it would feel. Not perfect. Real. They argued over small things, laughed about silly things, worked through challenges together. When they finally purchased their first home on the west side of Charlotte, it felt like a major achievement. The house wasn't luxurious. It didn't need to be. It belonged to them. They painted rooms themselves, spent weekends assembling furniture, made mistakes during home improvement projects, created memories inside every room. One purchase seemed insignificant at the time. A wooden dining table, 4 chairs. Nothing expensive, nothing remarkable. At least that's what everyone thought. The table sat beside a large kitchen window. Morning sunlight reached it first. Bills were paid there. Meals were shared there. Future plans were discussed there. Family visited there. For years, it became the center of their daily life. Whenever relatives stopped by, Conversations eventually ended around that table. Whenever friends visited, coffee cups found their way onto that table. Whenever Alora and Rowan talked about goals, vacations, finances, or dreams, they sat at that table. Without realizing it, the table became a witness to their marriage. The good moments, the difficult moments, the ordinary moments. From the outside, everything looked stable. Friends admired them. Family trusted them. Neighbors respected them. And honestly, for a long time, that image was real. Because before secrets entered the picture, before distance entered the picture, before another woman entered the picture, Alora Bennett and Rowan Whitaker truly believed they were building a future that would last forever. For the first several years of their marriage, Alora Bennett and Rowan Whitaker never worried about growing apart. Life felt manageable. Their routines worked. Their communication worked. Their future seemed secure. That was why neither of them noticed when things slowly began changing. The change did not arrive through a major argument. It did not arrive through betrayal. It arrived through responsibility. By the time Alora reached her mid-30s, her career as a financial counselor had grown significantly. More clients sought her help. More appointments filled her calendar. More people depended on her guidance. She enjoyed the work because she genuinely cared about helping people improve their lives. But success came with longer hours. Some evenings she arrived home mentally exhausted after spending entire days helping families navigate financial stress. Meanwhile, Rowan's career was also expanding. His project management position demanded more attention than ever before. Deadlines became tighter. Projects became larger. Expectations increased. What had once been a standard work week slowly evolved into something much heavier. At first, neither saw a problem. They were building careers, building stability, building the future they had always discussed. Whenever one of them worked late, the other understood. Whenever schedules became crowded, they adapted. That was what responsible adults did, or so they believed. Months passed, then more months. Without realizing it, their conversations began changing. Years earlier, dinner conversations had lasted hours. They talked about dreams, ideas, family, goals, funny moments from work, random thoughts that appeared during the day. Now many conversations sounded different. Did you pay the electric bill? Don't forget the appointment on Thursday. The plumber is coming next week. We need groceries. Can you pick up dry cleaning? Necessary conversations, practical conversations, but not meaningful conversations. One evening, Alora noticed it while they sat together on the couch. The television played in the background. Both held their phones. Almost 20 minutes passed. Neither spoke. Not because they were upset. Not because they were angry. Because silence had quietly become normal. Eventually, Rowan looked up. What do you want for dinner tomorrow? Alora answered. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. Then both returned to their screens. Hours later, while preparing for bed, a strange thought entered her mind. When was the last time they truly talked? Not about responsibilities, not about schedules, not about household tasks. Actually talked. The answer didn't come easily. That bothered her. At work, Alora spent every day helping people identify financial problems before those problems became crises. Patterns mattered. Small changes mattered. Ignoring warning signs created bigger issues later. Yet she never applied that same thinking to her own marriage. At least not yet. She simply assumed they were experiencing a busy season. Every couple experienced busy seasons. Every marriage faced challenges. There was no reason to worry. At least that was what she told herself. Around the same time, Rowan began using a phrase more often. Work schedules. The phrase appeared everywhere. When Alora suggested dinner with friends, work schedules. When she mentioned visiting family, work schedules. When she talked about taking a short weekend trip, work schedules. The explanation always sounded reasonable. That was what made it difficult to question. One Saturday morning, Alora stood in the kitchen making coffee. Sunlight streamed through the window beside the dining table, the same table that had witnessed years of conversations and plans. Rowan entered the kitchen dressed casually. For a brief moment, the scene felt familiar, comfortable, like old times. Alora smiled. You know what we should do? What? Take a weekend away. Rowan poured coffee into a mug. Maybe. She laughed. Maybe? Work has been crazy lately. There it was again. Work. She tried not to let disappointment show. It doesn't have to be anything expensive. I know. Just us. I'll see what I can do. The answer sounded polite, but it lacked enthusiasm. Years earlier, Rowan would have started discussing destinations immediately. Now, he seemed distracted. His attention appeared divided, even while standing directly beside her. The moment passed, but the feeling remained. Several weeks later, Alora attended a family cookout hosted by her cousin Niall. The Bennett family never needed a special occasion to gather. Someone always found a reason to light a grill and invite relatives. Children played in the yard. Music drifted through the neighborhood. Laughter came from every direction. It should have been a relaxing afternoon. Yet, Alora felt strangely disconnected. Her longtime friend Sadea noticed immediately. The two women stood near a picnic table watching younger relatives play football. You seem quiet today. Alora smiled. I'm fine. Sadea raised an eyebrow. That's not what I asked. Alora laughed softly. What do you mean? You seem somewhere else. For a moment, Alora considered dismissing the comment. Instead, she shrugged. I've just been tired. Sadea studied her, then asked a question that lingered long after the cookout ended. Tired or lonely? The question caught her off guard, because loneliness had never occurred to her. Not seriously. Loneliness belonged to people living alone, people without support, people without partners. Yet during the drive home, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Lonely. Was that possible? Could someone feel lonely while sharing a home with another person? The answer arrived before she reached her driveway. Yes, very possible. When she entered the house, Rowan sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. He looked up briefly. How was the cookout? Good. That's nice. His eyes returned to the screen. The conversation ended there, not because either person intended to end it, because neither pushed it further. Alora stood quietly for several seconds, watching, thinking, feeling something she couldn't fully explain. The distance between them wasn't measured in miles. It wasn't measured in rooms. It wasn't even measured in words. It was measured in connection. And lately, that connection felt weaker than it had ever been. For the first time in their marriage, Alora found herself sitting alone at the dining room table after Rowan went to bed. The house was silent. A coffee mug rested beside her. Moonlight filtered through the kitchen window. She looked at the empty chair across from her. The chair Rowan had occupied thousands of times over the years. Nothing dramatic had happened. Nothing obvious had gone wrong. Yet deep inside, she could feel something changing. She simply didn't know what. And that uncertainty would soon become impossible to ignore. The first warning did not arrive with a confession. It did not arrive through a text message. It did not arrive through a dramatic discovery. It arrived through numbers. That was fitting, considering numbers had always been part of Alora Bennett's life. Most evenings, after dinner, she spent time reviewing household finances, not because she distrusted money, because she respected it. Good financial habits helped prevent future problems. That belief guided both her career and her personal life. One Tuesday evening, Alora sat alone at the dining room table reviewing account activity. A lamp cast a warm glow across the paperwork spread before her. The house was quiet. Rowan had not returned from work yet. She moved through the statements methodically. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries, everything looked normal. Then something caught her attention. A restaurant charge, nothing unusual by itself. People ate at restaurants every day. She continued reviewing. A few pages later, another restaurant charge appeared. Different date, different amount. Again, not unusual. Then she noticed a third charge, and a fourth. Alora leaned back slightly, not alarmed, just curious, because during the past several months, Rowan had repeatedly described his work schedule the same way. Busy, overwhelming, exhausting. According to him, many evenings barely allowed time for dinner. Yet the statements suggested otherwise. She studied the dates again. The charges weren't excessive. The amounts weren't shocking. Still, something about the pattern felt inconsistent. Not enough to create suspicion. Enough to create questions. A few minutes later, the front door opened. Rowan entered carrying his work bag. His shoulders looked tense. His tie hung slightly loose. At first glance, he appeared exactly like a man finishing another long day. "Hey!" Alora said. "Hey, long day?" "The longest." The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Not because the words sounded dishonest, because they sounded practiced, as though he had already prepared them before walking through the door. The thought surprised her. Almost immediately she dismissed it. Everyone repeated themselves after stressful weeks. There was no reason to overthink a simple answer. Yet the feeling remained, subtle, persistent. Later that evening, while Rowan showered upstairs, Alora found herself looking again at the restaurant charges, not searching for wrongdoing, simply trying to understand them. Before she could think further, she closed the statement. Enough. There was no reason to create problems where none existed, or so she believed. Over the following weeks, life continued normally, at least on the surface, but small observations began accumulating, the kind most people ignore, the kind that seem meaningless until viewed together. One evening, Rowan sat beside her watching television. His phone rested on the coffee table. A notification appeared. The screen lit briefly. Rowan grabbed the phone almost instantly. The speed of the reaction caught her attention, not the notification. The reaction. Another night, he stepped outside during dinner to answer a call. When he returned, he offered no explanation. Alora didn't ask for one. A third time, she noticed him turning his phone face down when entering a room. Again, not evidence, just different. Months earlier, he never cared where the phone sat. Now he always seemed aware of its location. One Saturday afternoon, they drove across Charlotte to visit a home improvement store. The trip should have felt familiar. Years earlier, they spent entire weekends doing projects together. Those outings had always been enjoyable. But something felt off. Rowan checked his phone repeatedly, several times during the drive, several times inside the store, several times while standing beside her. Eventually, Alora laughed. "Expecting an emergency?" Rowan looked up quickly. "What?" "You've checked your phone about 20 times. He forced a smile. "Work stuff." "Work." The answer appeared again. She nodded. Nothing more, but a small voice inside her whispered a question. Since when did work follow him everywhere? A few days later, they discussed their upcoming wedding anniversary. 11 years. A milestone Alora considered important. That evening she prepared dinner and waited for the right moment. When they finished eating, she smiled. "We should do something special for our anniversary." Rowan took a sip of water. "Sure. What about a weekend trip?" He hesitated. The pause lasted only a second, maybe less, but she noticed. "I'll have to see what work looks like." There it was again, the same answer, the same shield, the same excuse. Work. For the first time, disappointment outweighed understanding, not because he declined, because he seemed unwilling to even consider it. Alora looked down at her plate. A strange sadness settled over her, not anger, not frustration, sadness, because she suddenly realized she missed her husband while sitting across from him. That realization followed her for days. The feeling became stronger whenever they shared a room, stronger whenever conversations ended quickly, stronger whenever Rowan disappeared into his phone. One evening, she sat once again at the dining room table after Rowan had gone upstairs. The familiar scratches in the wood caught her attention. The coffee stain near one corner remained visible. For years, this table represented stability, consistency, partnership. Now she found herself staring at it while trying to understand a feeling she couldn't explain. The restaurant charges, the phone, the constant work explanations, the emotional distance. Each observation seemed small alone. Together, they formed a picture she didn't want to see, a picture she wasn't ready to name. The house remained silent. Alora folded her hands together and looked toward the staircase. For a long moment, she simply sat there, thinking, remembering, questioning. And then, for the first time since their marriage began, a thought entered her mind that she could no longer push away. Something is wrong. She didn't know what. She didn't know why. But deep inside, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The life she believed she was living and the life she was actually living were beginning to look very different. And that realization changed everything. The thought stayed with Alora Bennett for days. Something is wrong. She still had no proof. But she stopped trying to convince herself that everything was normal. That was the change. For months, she had explained away every concern. Now she decided to pay attention, not accuse, not confront, just observe. The following weekend, she met Sadea for coffee at a small cafe near downtown Charlotte. The two friends had known each other long enough to skip small talk. The moment they sat down, Sadea noticed the concern on Alora's face. "You've been carrying something around for weeks." Alora wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I think something is changing between me and Rowan." Sadea listened carefully. "What kind of changing?" "I don't know." "That's not true." Alora sighed. She knew Sadea well enough to understand she wasn't going to accept vague answers. "We live in the same house, but it feels different." Sadea nodded. "Go on." "He works more." "Lots of people work more." "I know." "He uses work as an answer for everything now." That caught Sadea's attention. Alora continued. "If I suggest dinner, work comes up. If I suggest a trip, work comes up. If I suggest spending time together, work comes up." Sadea took a sip of coffee. "Have you asked him directly?" "No." "Why not?" Because Alora already knew the answer. She had asked in different ways. The response never changed. Work, deadlines, meetings, schedules. The conversation moved on, but Sadea left her with a piece of advice. Pay attention to actions, not words. People can explain anything with words. That statement stayed with Alora. 3 days later, she visited her parents. Celeste Bennett noticed almost immediately that something was bothering her daughter. Mothers rarely missed those things. While helping prepare dinner, Celeste looked over. "You've got a lot on your mind." Alora smiled. "You sound like Sadea." "Maybe Sadea is right." Alora laughed. Then she became serious. "Do you ever know something before you can prove it?" Celeste stopped chopping vegetables. "What do you mean?" "I don't know." The answer frustrated her. Because it was true. She didn't know. She simply felt unsettled. Celeste placed a hand on her shoulder. "Trust your eyes." Alora looked up. "What?" "People tell you who they are every day." That advice joined everything else she had been hearing. Pay attention. Trust your eyes. Watch actions. The message was becoming impossible to ignore. A few days later, she attended a family dinner hosted by Aunt Vernice. The evening started normally. Food, stories, family updates. The kind of gathering Alora had attended her entire life. At one point, Aunt Vernice pulled her aside. "Marriage doing all right?" The question surprised her. "Why would you ask that?" Aunt Vernice shrugged. "Because you don't talk about Rowan the way you used to." Alora froze. That observation landed harder than expected. Even other people were noticing changes. Not the affair, not the secret, the distance. That alone was enough to trouble her. Back at home, she started noticing details she previously ignored. One evening, Rowan walked into the kitchen, talking about a major project at work. For the first time, a new name appeared. "Brielle thinks the client might delay approval." Alora looked up. "Brielle?" "A consultant." Rowan opened the refrigerator. "She's helping with the project." The conversation moved on. Nothing seemed unusual. At least, not yet. A few days later, the name appeared again. Brielle handled part of the presentation. Another day, Brielle suggested a different strategy. Then another, Brielle caught an issue before the meeting. Alora found herself noticing the pattern, not because the comments sounded inappropriate, because the same name kept returning. People discussed coworkers all the time. Still, something felt different. Over the next 2 weeks, she quietly kept track. Without meaning to, she realized she could remember Brielle's name more easily than the names of most people Rowan worked with. That bothered her. One evening, Rowan arrived home unusually cheerful. The difference was obvious. He had spent months appearing tired and distracted. Now, he looked energized, almost excited. "What happened?" Alora asked. "Good meeting." "That good?" Rowan laughed. "Better than expected." He headed upstairs carrying his phone. A few seconds later, she heard it vibrate. Then another vibration. Then another. Messages, several in a row. Rowan responded immediately. Alora watched from the kitchen, not suspicious, not yet, but no longer willing to dismiss everything she saw. For the first time, she accepted something important. Her instincts were trying to tell her something. She didn't know what the answer was. She didn't know where the clues would lead, but she finally stopped fighting the feeling. And once she started paying attention, the pieces began appearing much faster than before. Once Alora Bennett stopped dismissing her concerns, she began seeing things she had overlooked for months. Not dramatic discoveries, patterns. And patterns had always mattered to her. Every day at work, she helped people understand that financial problems rarely appeared overnight. Small decisions created larger consequences. Small inconsistencies often revealed larger truths. Now she found herself applying that same thinking to her own life. One Thursday evening, she sat at the dining room table, reviewing household records. The familiar scratch near the corner of the table caught her eye. The coffee stain was still there. Everything around her looked normal, yet the numbers in front of her were beginning to tell a different story. She started with recent account statements. Nothing unusual appeared at first. Mortgage payments, utility bills, insurance, groceries. Then she reached the restaurant charges again. This time she looked closer. Dates, amounts, locations. She wrote them down on a notepad. Then she compared them against Rowan's work schedule. Almost immediately, something stood out. Several charges appeared on evenings. Rowan claimed he was working late. That did not automatically mean anything. Business dinners existed. Client meetings existed. Corporate events existed. But she wanted facts, not assumptions. The next evening she asked a simple question. Nothing confrontational, nothing emotional, just a question. How was your dinner meeting last Tuesday? Rowan barely looked up from his phone. It was fine. Who was there? A few people from work. Anyone the first no? No. The answer came quickly, too quickly, not nervous, not angry, just automatic. The conversation ended there, but later that night, Alora reviewed the statement again. The restaurant charge showed a dinner for two, not a large group, not a business gathering. 2 people. The details settled heavily in her mind. The following week brought more questions. Another restaurant charge appeared. Different location, different amount, same pattern. Again, she compared dates. Again, the timeline failed to match Rowan's explanations. She wasn't hunting for evidence. The evidence was starting to find her. One afternoon, while helping a client organize retirement accounts, Alora caught herself thinking about her own situation. The client had ignored warning signs for years. Missing paperwork, unexplained withdrawals, confusing financial activity. The problems became obvious only after enough pieces accumulated. That realization followed her home, because the same thing seemed to be happening in her marriage. Not one major clue, many small ones, each connected to the next. A few days later, Rowan mentioned another business trip. Atlanta again, he said. How long? 3 days. When do you leave? Wednesday morning. Alora nodded. The answer sounded ordinary, yet something bothered her. Not the trip itself, the way he delivered the information, almost like a prepared announcement. The following Wednesday, Rowan left exactly as planned. Once he was gone, Alora continued her normal routine. Work, appointments, meetings, nothing unusual, until later that evening, while reviewing recent transactions, she noticed something strange. A charge appeared from a restaurant, not in Atlanta, Charlotte. The date matched the same day Rowan claimed he was already out of town. Alora stared at the screen. The explanation could be simple. Maybe the charge posted late. Maybe there was another reason. Still, she wrote it down. Another inconsistency. Another unanswered question. By now, her notebook contained several pages. Dates, charges, locations, timelines. Nothing dramatic, just information. The same approach she taught clients every day. Facts before conclusions. Facts before decisions. Facts before reactions. One Saturday morning, she spread everything across the dining room table. Bank records, calendar entries, credit card statements, travel dates. For nearly 2 hours, she reviewed everything carefully. The more she organized the information, the clearer the picture became. The problem wasn't any single expense. The problem was repetition. The same types of charges, the same gaps in explanations, the same contradictions, patterns. Patterns never lied. People sometimes lied, Memories sometimes failed. Excuses sometimes changed. Patterns remained consistent. That afternoon, Rowan returned from running errands. He found Alora sitting at the table. "You working?" "Just organizing finances." His expression changed for a fraction of a second. Only a fraction, but she noticed. "Everything okay?" He asked. "Why wouldn't it be?" He smiled. "No reason." Then he walked away. The exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet something about it stayed with her. For months, Rowan had shown little interest in household finances. Suddenly, he seemed curious. That curiosity raised another question. What exactly was he worried she might find? Over the next week, Alora became even more careful. Not obsessive, careful. She reviewed information, checked dates, verified facts, removed assumptions. Every step pointed in the same direction. The story Rowan told her no longer matched the evidence she was seeing. That realization marked a turning point. Because until then, she still hoped she was mistaken. She still hoped there was an explanation she simply hadn't discovered. Now, that hope was fading. Not disappearing, fading. And as more inconsistencies surfaced, Alora began understanding a difficult truth. The answers she was looking for were getting closer, and she wasn't sure she was going to like what she found. By the time autumn arrived in Charlotte, Alora Bennett no longer believed the problems in her marriage were caused by work alone. Too many things failed to add up. Too many explanations led nowhere. Too many details refused to fit together. She still hadn't reached a final conclusion, but she had stopped giving Rowan Whitaker the benefit of every doubt. The facts simply would not allow it. Over the next several weeks, one name continued appearing: Brielle. At first, the mentions seemed harmless. Then they became impossible to ignore. One evening, Rowan arrived home later than usual. Alora was finishing dinner. As soon as he entered the kitchen, he started talking about his day. The client finally approved the proposal. "That's good." "Yeah, Brielle worked hard on that one." Alora nodded. A few minutes later, Rowan mentioned Brielle again. Then, later that same evening, her name came up a third time. By the end of the night, Alora realized something. Rowan talked about Brielle more than any other coworker, more than managers, more than clients, more than people he had worked with for years. The realization settled heavily in her mind, not because it proved anything, because it revealed where Rowan's attention seemed to be focused. The following week, his phone behavior became even more noticeable. Whenever a message arrived, he responded immediately. Whenever the phone vibrated, he checked it. Whenever he left a room, the phone left with him. One Saturday morning, Alora walked into the kitchen earlier than usual. Rowan sat at the dining table. His attention was fixed on his screen. A smile crossed his face. A genuine smile, the kind she had not seen directed toward her in months. The moment he noticed her, the smile disappeared. The phone flipped face down. "Morning," he said. "Morning." The exchange lasted only seconds, but Alora carried it with her all day, because people often revealed themselves when they believed nobody was watching. A few days later, another business trip appeared on Rowan's calendar. This time the destination was Atlanta again, at least according to him. He packed the night before, left early the next morning. Everything looked routine. Everything looked normal. 3 days later, he returned home, tired, predictable, prepared, almost as if he had rehearsed the entire trip before walking through the front door. That evening, Alora reviewed account activity. At first, she expected nothing new. Then she found it, a hotel charge. The amount immediately caught her attention. It wasn't a standard business hotel. It was expensive, far more expensive than Rowan's company usually approved. She checked the date. Then she checked the location. Her stomach tightened. The hotel wasn't in Atlanta. It wasn't even close. She looked again, then again. The charge remained exactly where it was. A different city, a different hotel, a different story. For several minutes, she sat frozen at the dining table. Not because she lacked understanding, because understanding was arriving too quickly. The next morning, she reviewed additional records. More hotel activity appeared. Different dates, different locations. The pattern repeated itself. The same periods Rowan claimed to be traveling for work. The same gaps in his explanations. The same unanswered questions. Now the questions were becoming difficult to ignore. That afternoon she called Sadea. The moment Sadea answered, She knew something was wrong. What happened? Alora took a breath. I found hotel charges. The line became quiet. What kind of hotel charges? The kind that don't match where Rowan says he's been. Sadea immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. Are you sure? I checked 3 times. What are you thinking? That question was harder to answer, because for months, Alora had avoided saying the words out loud. Saying them would make them real, and she wasn't sure she wanted that reality. Still, the truth demanded honesty. I think there may be someone else. The sentence left her mouth slowly, painfully, but once spoken, it could not be taken back. Sadea didn't rush to conclusions. That was one reason Alora trusted her. What makes you think that? Alora explained everything. The restaurant charges, the changing stories, the constant phone activity, the hotel records, the repeated mentions of Brielle. When she finished, Sadea spoke carefully. I don't know what's happening. Neither do I. But I know this. What? You're not imagining it anymore. That statement hit harder than anything else, because deep down, Alora already knew it was true. Months earlier, she questioned herself. Months earlier, she wondered if stress was affecting her judgment. Months earlier, she kept explaining away every concern. Not anymore. Now she had facts. Not enough facts, but facts nonetheless. That night, after Rowan went upstairs, Alora remained at the dining table, the same table that had witnessed 11 years of marriage, the same table where bills were paid, dreams were discussed, plans were made. Now it held something different: evidence, questions, fear. For the first time since this journey began, Alora allowed herself to consider a possibility she had spent months avoiding. Not distance, not stress, not work, an affair. The word hurt. The possibility hurt even more, because if she was right, the life she believed she had built with Rowan Whitaker was standing on a foundation far weaker than she ever imagined. And before long, she would discover that the truth was far worse than she feared. After admitting to Sadea that she suspected an affair, Alora Bennett stopped asking herself whether something was wrong. Now she wanted to know how much was wrong. There was a difference. For months, she had lived with questions. Now she wanted answers. She continued going to work. She continued paying bills. She continued living her normal life. But every evening, she returned to the dining room table and added another piece to the puzzle. The process was simple. No spying, no emotional confrontations, no dramatic scenes, just facts, dates, receipts, travel records, bank statements. The same method she taught clients every day. Facts first, conclusions later. One evening, she spread several months of records across the table. The pattern immediately became clearer. Restaurant charges, hotel charges, travel expenses, everything seemed connected. The biggest problem was timing. The dates never lined up correctly. Work trips appeared in one place. Financial records pointed somewhere else. The story Rowan told at home and the information appearing in front of her were becoming 2 completely different things. Alora needed another set of eyes, someone she trusted, someone who understood numbers, someone who would look at facts instead of emotions. That person was Taryn Holloway. They had known each other since college. Taryn worked in corporate accounting and had built a reputation for being careful and precise. A few days later, they met for lunch. Alora brought copies of the records. Taryn listened without interrupting. She reviewed statements, compared dates, checked locations. Then she reviewed everything again. When she finished, she looked directly at Alora. These records don't support his explanations. The statement was direct, exactly what Alora expected from Taryn. Can you explain? Taryn tapped several transactions. These restaurant charges don't fit business travel. She pointed to another page. These hotel records create even more questions. Then she moved to another section. And this is the biggest issue. Alora leaned forward. What? The timelines. Taryn slid several pages together. The same trip produces different stories depending on which record you're reading. Alora already suspected that. Hearing someone else confirm it made the situation feel much more serious. Over the next week, she reviewed every business trip Rowan had taken during the past year. The results were disturbing. Atlanta appeared repeatedly, but supporting records often showed activity somewhere else. Different cities, different locations, different expenses. Nothing matched cleanly. Every answer created two more questions. One Saturday morning, Rowan mentioned another upcoming trip. The announcement sounded routine, almost rehearsed. Client meetings next week. Where? Atlanta. The answer arrived immediately. Alora simply nodded. She didn't challenge him, didn't argue, didn't reveal what she already knew. Instead, she waited. 3 days later, Rowan left. The moment his car disappeared from the driveway, Alora began checking information, not because she wanted to catch him, because she wanted certainty. By evening, another charge appeared. Not Atlanta. Again, the same pattern, the same contradiction, the same story repeating itself. At that point, the work trips stopped making sense entirely. Business travel followed rules, schedules, approvals, expense reports. Rowan's travel history looked increasingly personal rather than professional. That realization hit harder than anything she had found so far, because it removed one of the last explanations she had been holding on to. Weeks earlier, she still believed there might be an innocent answer. Now that possibility was disappearing. Every document pointed in the same direction. Every timeline pointed in the same direction. Every inconsistency pointed in the same direction. One evening, after Rowan went upstairs, Alora sat alone at the dining room table reviewing everything she had collected. The stack had grown significantly. Statements, notes, travel records, expense histories. What once looked like isolated incidents now formed a complete picture. Not every detail was visible, but enough was visible. Enough to understand the truth was close. Very close. Her phone rang. It was Taryn. I reviewed those records again. What do you think? Taryn didn't hesitate. I think you're looking at something much bigger than bad communication. Alora already knew that. Still, hearing the words felt heavy, because she was running out of alternative explanations. Months earlier, she feared she was overreacting. Now she feared she wasn't. For the first time since this began, the evidence felt overwhelming. Not one charge, not one trip, not one inconsistency. All of it together, every piece supporting the same conclusion. Alora closed the folder and looked across the room. The house appeared exactly the same as it always had. The same walls, the same furniture, the same dining room table, yet everything felt different, because she was no longer searching for clues. She was getting closer to the truth. And deep down, she knew the next discovery would change her life forever. By this point, Alora Bennett was getting closer to the truth. What she did not know was that Rowan Whitaker had already crossed lines he once promised himself he would never cross. The affair had not started with a hotel room. It had not started with a secret dinner. It had started much earlier. It started with attention. Months before Alora noticed the strange charges, Rowan attended a regional business conference. That was where he spent more time with Brielle Hart. At first, their relationship looked completely professional. They worked on the same projects, attended the same meetings, solved the same problems. Nothing about it appeared inappropriate. In fact, if someone had asked Rowan then, he would have insisted nothing was happening, because at that stage, nothing was. The problem began when those conversations continued after work. A quick text became a longer conversation. A work discussion became a personal discussion. Personal discussions became daily conversations. Every step felt small. Every step felt harmless. That was exactly why Rowan never stopped it. Brielle listened when he complained about work. She listened when he discussed stress. She listened when he talked about feeling exhausted. The attention felt good. The admiration felt good. And Rowan began looking forward to it. Back at home, the situation looked very different. Alora wanted conversations. Rowan wanted quiet. Alora wanted connection. Rowan wanted escape. Instead of addressing the growing distance in his marriage, he started investing more energy somewhere else. That choice changed everything. Weeks became months. The messages increased. The phone calls increased. The emotional connection deepened. Eventually, Rowan began sharing things with Brielle that he no longer shared with his wife. That should have been his warning sign. Instead, he ignored it. One evening after a project meeting, Rowan and Brielle stayed behind discussing work. The conversation drifted into personal territory, then into marriage, then into frustrations. Neither stopped the discussion. Neither created boundaries. Neither stepped back. From that point forward, the relationship was no longer purely professional. The shift happened gradually. That made it easier to justify. Rowan convinced himself nothing serious was happening. He told himself he deserved a friend. He told himself he deserved someone who understood him. He told himself he was not hurting anyone. The lies came easily because they protected the truth. Months later, when the relationship became physical, Rowan crossed a line he could never uncross. Yet even then, he continued creating excuses. He blamed work stress. He blamed distance at home. He blamed routine. He blamed boredom. He blamed everything except the person making the decisions, himself. That became the pattern. Every poor choice required another excuse. Every excuse required another lie. Every lie required another secret. Soon Rowan found himself managing two lives. One life existed at home. The other existed with Brielle. At home, he discussed anniversaries, family plans, and future goals. With Brielle, he acted like a man building a completely different future. The longer it continued, the more complicated it became. But Rowan never stopped, because stopping would require honesty. Honesty would require consequences, and Rowan was avoiding consequences at all costs. Meanwhile, Brielle believed something very different. She knew Rowan was married. She knew the situation was complicated. But over time, she convinced herself the marriage was already failing. That belief allowed her to continue. The more Rowan complained about his home life, the easier it became for Brielle to justify her role in the relationship. Neither wanted to view themselves as the villain. Most people don't. Instead, they created stories that made their choices feel reasonable. Those stories protected them from guilt, at least temporarily. Back in Charlotte, Alora continued collecting facts. She still didn't know every detail. She still didn't know how far things had gone, but she was getting closer every day. While Rowan spent his energy maintaining two separate worlds, Alora spent hers uncovering the truth. The difference mattered. One person was creating deception. The other was searching for reality. The gap between those two paths grew larger each week. What Rowan failed to understand was that secrets become harder to manage over time. Every hidden relationship creates pressure. Every lie creates another lie. Every contradiction leaves a trace, and traces were everywhere now. Restaurant charges, travel records, hotel expenses, phone activity, repeated mentions of Brielle. None of those things existed by accident. They existed because Rowan believed he could control the situation. He believed he could manage both lives indefinitely. Many people believe that. Very few succeed. The truth always has a way of catching up, especially when someone starts paying attention. And Alora was paying attention now more than ever. While Rowan sat across from Brielle during dinners and business trips, Alora sat at the dining room table connecting pieces. Neither fully understood how close they were to a collision, but it was coming. The evidence was growing. The contradictions were multiplying. The secrets were becoming harder to hide. Most importantly, one final discovery was waiting just ahead, a discovery that would reveal something even worse than the affair itself. Because Alora was about to learn that this wasn't a recent mistake. It wasn't a brief lapse in judgment. It wasn't a short-term relationship. The betrayal had been woven through nearly an entire year of her life. And when she finally learned the full timeline, the damage would hit harder than anything she had discovered so far. The discovery came on a Thursday afternoon. A client canceled an appointment. Alora Bennett suddenly had 2 free hours in the middle of her day. Instead of leaving early, she returned to something that had consumed her thoughts for months. The records, the timelines, the unanswered questions. She opened her laptop and began reviewing everything again, not because she expected to find something new, because she wanted certainty. By now, the affair itself was no longer the biggest question. The bigger question was how long it had been happening. That answer had remained hidden. Until now, Alora compared travel dates with financial records. Then she compared those dates with Rowan Whitaker's calendar entries. Next, she reviewed older statements. Months older, much older. That was when the pattern finally revealed itself. Her heart sank. The earliest signs did not begin a few months ago. They stretched much further back. Restaurant visits, travel expenses, hotel charges, repeated activity. The dates connected perfectly. Alora grabbed a notebook and started writing. One date led to another, then another. Soon an entire timeline sat in front of her. The realization hit hard. This had not been happening for a few weeks. It had not been happening for a few months. The affair had lasted nearly a year. Nearly a year. Alora stared at the page. For months, she had prepared herself for bad news. Nothing prepared her for that. A year, 12 months, hundreds of days, hundreds of choices, hundreds of opportunities for Rowan to stop, hundreds of opportunities for Rowan to tell the truth. Instead, he continued. The length of the deception hurt more than the affair itself, because a year contained everything: birthdays, family gatherings, weekend trips, holiday celebrations, anniversary discussions, promises, memories. Every memory suddenly looked different. Alora leaned back in her chair. For the first time since this began, she felt physically exhausted. Not from work, not from stress, from disappointment. She remembered her birthday dinner. Rowan had smiled across the table, given her a thoughtful gift, told her he loved her. At the time, she believed every word. Now she realized Brielle Hart was already part of his life. That memory no longer felt the same. Another memory surfaced. Thanksgiving. Both families gathered together. Celeste Bennett cooked enough food for 20 people. Darnell Bennett spent the afternoon joking with relatives. Rowan sat beside Alora the entire day, laughing, talking, acting like everything was normal. Meanwhile, he was already protecting a secret. The realization cut deeply. Then came Christmas. Family photographs, gift exchanges, holiday traditions. Another lie hidden behind another smile. Alora opened an old photo on her phone. She and Rowan stood together in front of a Christmas tree. Everyone looked happy. At least everyone except the person who now knew the truth. She quickly closed the image. The pain was becoming difficult to ignore. The worst memory arrived next. Their anniversary. 11 years. The conversation where she suggested a weekend trip. The hesitation. The excuse about work. Now she understood why. It was never about work. The answer had been sitting in front of her all along. For nearly a year, Rowan had been dividing his life between two women. That fact changed everything. A single mistake could be explained. A year required planning. A year required commitment. A year required deliberate choices. Alora finally understood the full scope of what had happened. This wasn't a marriage struggling through a difficult season. This was a marriage being quietly abandoned, while one person still believed they were building a future together. Tears filled her eyes, not because she wanted Rowan back, not because she wanted explanations, because she was grieving the life she thought she had. That grief felt heavier than anger. For several minutes, she sat alone in her office. Then something unexpected happened. The sadness slowly gave way to clarity. The truth hurt, but uncertainty had hurt too. At least now she knew what she was facing. At least now she could stop searching. At least now she could start making decisions. That evening she drove home. The house looked exactly the same. The dining room table sat beside the kitchen window. The chairs remained in their usual places. Everything appeared unchanged. But Alora had changed because she finally understood the truth. The next morning, she made a decision. No more guessing, no more waiting, no more hoping the facts would somehow change. She needed a plan. That plan began with a phone call. Late that afternoon, she contacted Corinne Vale. The attorney came highly recommended. Practical, organized, respected, exactly the type of person Alora needed. They scheduled a meeting. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just a meeting. Yet when Alora ended the call, she felt something she had not felt in months. Control. For nearly a year, Rowan had controlled the information. For months, uncertainty had controlled her emotions. Now, neither controlled her future. The facts were clear. The timeline was clear. The betrayal was clear. And for the first time since this painful journey began, Alora Bennett stopped focusing on what Rowan had done. She started focusing on what she would do next. The morning after speaking with attorney Corinne Vale, Alora Bennett woke up with a different mindset. For months, she had spent her energy searching for answers. Now she had them. The affair was real. The timeline was real. The betrayal was real. What mattered next was protecting herself. A few days later, she met Corinne at her office. The meeting was not emotional, it was practical. Corinne reviewed documents, account information, property records, retirement accounts, insurance policies, everything connected to 11 years of marriage. Alora appreciated that approach. She did not need sympathy. She needed a plan. Corinne worked methodically. She explained each step clearly. What matters most right now is preparation. Alora nodded. Not confrontation? No. Corinne shook her head. Preparation first, conversations later. The advice made sense. As painful as the situation was, emotions could not guide major decisions. Facts had brought her this far. Facts would guide the next stage too. Over the next several weeks, Alora gathered documents, tax records, bank statements, mortgage information, investment accounts. She organized everything carefully. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was overlooked. Every evening she reviewed another section. Every weekend she completed another task. The work was exhausting, but it gave her confidence. For the first time in nearly a year, she felt in control of her future. Meanwhile, Rowan continued living as though nothing had changed. He left for work, came home, talked about meetings, talked about deadlines, talked about projects. The routine continued. The difference was that Alora now saw everything through a different lens. She no longer listened for explanations. She listened for inconsistencies, and they kept appearing. One evening, Rowan mentioned another work dinner. A few months earlier, that statement would have ruined her night. Now she simply nodded. The reaction surprised her, not because the pain disappeared, because something else had replaced it. Acceptance. The truth no longer shocked her. She already knew it. The next step was deciding how she wanted to respond. One weekend, Sadea visited the house. The two women sat together in the kitchen. Takeout containers covered the table. For a while, they talked about ordinary things: work, family, life. Then Sadea asked the question she had been holding back. What happens now? Alora answered immediately. I'm moving forward. Have you decided how? Yes. Sadea studied her friend carefully. You seem calmer. I am. That answer was true. Not because the situation hurt less, because uncertainty was gone. Uncertainty had been the hardest part. Now she understood exactly what she was dealing with. Sadea nodded. You thinking about revenge? The question made Alora smile. No, not even a little. No, she meant it. Months earlier, she might have wanted revenge. Months earlier, she might have wanted Rowan embarrassed, humiliated, exposed. Now she wanted something different. Freedom. The distinction mattered. Revenge would keep her focused on Rowan. Freedom would allow her to focus on herself. Corinne reinforced the same idea during another meeting. Don't make decisions based on anger. I won't. Good. Corinne closed a folder. Anger fades. Consequences stay. That advice stayed with Alora. Every time she felt frustration, she reminded herself of the bigger goal. The goal was not winning an argument. The goal was building a future that no longer depended on Rowan's choices. Weeks passed. The legal preparation continued. The financial preparation continued. The emotional preparation continued. During that time, something unexpected happened. Alora stopped thinking about Brielle Hart. As often, the shift surprised her. For months, Brielle occupied too much space in her thoughts. Now she saw the situation differently. Brielle had not made promises to her. Rowan had. That realization simplified everything. The real issue was never Brielle. The real issue was Rowan's decisions. Once Alora accepted that truth, her focus became much sharper. One evening she sat alone reviewing the final documents Corinne requested. The paperwork was nearly complete. Every major decision had been addressed. Every important record had been organized. The finish line was approaching. Alora looked through the last folder and felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Relief. Not happiness. Not excitement. Relief. Because after months of confusion, uncertainty, and heartbreak, she finally had a direction. The next chapter of her life was approaching, and unlike the past year, it would be built on truth. By the time the legal preparation was complete, Alora Bennett had reached a place she never expected. She was no longer searching for answers. She was preparing for an ending. Corinne Vale had reviewed the paperwork. The documents were ready. The financial protections were in place. Every important decision had been handled carefully. The only thing left was timing. And then timing arrived on its own. 3 days later, Rowan Whitaker mentioned another dinner. The announcement came casually while he was getting ready for work. Client dinner Friday night. Alora looked up from her coffee. What time? Probably around 7. Big client? Important enough. The answer sounded familiar. For nearly a year, work had become Rowan's explanation for everything. This time, however, Alora already knew more than he realized. She simply nodded. Have a good meeting. I will. Rowan left for work believing the conversation was over. For Alora, it had just begun. Later that afternoon, information reached her through the same collection of facts that had exposed the affair in the first place. The dinner was not a client meeting. It was another dinner with Brielle Hart. Another evening, another lie, another choice. Months earlier, that discovery would have broken her heart all over again. Now it confirmed something she already understood. Rowan had no intention of stopping. That realization removed any remaining doubt. The marriage was over. The only question was how she wanted to close the chapter. That evening, she contacted Corinne. The attorney listened carefully. Then, she asked a simple question. What do you want? The answer came immediately. Closure. Corinne nodded. Not revenge. No. Not confrontation? No. What then? Alora looked through the kitchen window before answering, I want the truth to arrive at the same table where the lie is sitting. Corinne understood immediately. Over the following days, they discussed details, not emotions. Details. Everything needed to be legal. Everything needed to be professional. Everything needed to remain calm. Alora refused to create a public argument. She refused to create a spectacle. She refused to become the story. The facts would speak for themselves. By Wednesday evening, the plan was complete, simple, direct, final. For the first time since discovering the affair, Alora slept peacefully, not because she felt victorious, because she felt ready. Thursday passed quietly. Rowan moved through the house exactly as he always did, checking messages, talking about work, preparing for Friday. At one point, he even discussed a future home improvement project. The conversation struck Alora as almost unbelievable. He was talking about future plans while secretly preparing for another dinner with Brielle. The contrast would have angered her months earlier. Now it simply confirmed what she already knew. The next morning arrived. Friday, the final day of their marriage as they knew it. Alora went to work, met with clients, answered emails, completed reports. She treated the day normally. That normal routine helped her stay focused. Late in the afternoon, Sadea called. You okay? I'm fine. You sure? Very. Sadea laughed softly. I know that voice. What voice? The voice you use when you've already made your decision. Alora smiled. That was true. The decision had already been made. Nothing that happened tonight would change it. A few hours later, Rowan returned home to get ready. He selected one of his better jackets, checked his reflection, adjusted his tie. The sight was painful for one reason. Alora remembered a time when he dressed that way for her. Now he was dressing that way for someone else. The memory lasted only a moment. Then it passed, because the future mattered more than the past. You heading out? She asked. Yeah. What time will you be home? Probably late. Another lie. Another effortless lie. Rowan grabbed his keys. I'll see you later. Alora looked directly at him. Have a good evening. I will. A few seconds later, the front door closed. His car pulled away. And just like that, the final stage began. The house became quiet. Alora remained seated for several minutes, not second-guessing herself, not reconsidering, simply gathering her thoughts. Everything had led to this point. The restaurant charges, the hotel records, the hidden relationship, the year of deception, the legal preparation. Every step pointed toward tonight. She stood and picked up her purse. The envelope was already prepared. The documents were already signed. The future was already waiting. Outside, the Charlotte evening felt warm and calm. Traffic moved through the city. Families headed to dinner. People lived ordinary lives. Few would remember this night. For Rowan and Alora, however, it would become the night everything changed. Across town, Rowan believed he was heading toward another secret dinner. Alora knew he was heading toward the consequences of every decision he had made during the past year, and neither of them had yet reached the most important moment of the evening. Friday evening arrived exactly as Rowan Whitaker expected, at least in the beginning. He drove across Charlotte believing he was heading toward another private dinner with Brielle Hart. The restaurant sat in one of the city's most popular upscale districts. Valet attendants greeted arriving guests. Soft music drifted through the dining room. Families celebrated special occasions. Couples enjoyed quiet dinners. Business professionals held meetings over expensive meals. To everyone else, it was an ordinary Friday night. Rowan entered confidently. A hostess guided him toward a reserved table. Brielle was already there. She smiled when she saw him approaching. "You're late." "Traffic." He sat down. The waiter arrived. Menus were opened. Drinks were ordered. The evening began exactly like many others before it. They discussed work, upcoming projects, office politics, weekend plans. The conversation felt comfortable, familiar, safe. That was the illusion Rowan had been living inside for nearly a year. He believed he had everything under control. At home, he had a wife. Here, he had Brielle. Two separate worlds, two separate lives, one carefully protected secret. For nearly 12 months, he convinced himself he could keep it that way. The waiter returned with their drinks. More conversation followed, more laughter, more normality. Nothing suggested that this evening would be different. Then the waiter appeared once again. This time, he carried a sealed envelope. Professional, calm, expressionless. He stopped beside Rowan's chair. "Good evening, sir." Rowan looked up. "Yes?" "This was left for you." The waiter placed the envelope on the table. Then, he walked away. Rowan frowned. The envelope looked ordinary. No company logo, no restaurant branding, no explanation. Brielle looked at it. "What's that?" "No idea." Rowan picked it up. For a second, he assumed it was work-related. Maybe a client document. Maybe information connected to a meeting. Maybe a mistake. Whatever he expected, it wasn't reality. He opened the envelope, removed the contents, looked down. Everything changed. His expression disappeared instantly. His body became completely still. The first page carried a law firm's heading. The second page carried legal language. The third page removed every remaining doubt. Divorce papers. Official. Prepared. Signed. Ready. Rowan stared at the documents. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Across the table, Brielle's smile faded. "What is it?" Rowan didn't answer. His eyes continued moving across the pages. Every line confirmed the same truth. His marriage was ending. Not someday. Now. Brielle leaned closer. "Rowan?" Still no answer, because attached to the paperwork was a handwritten note. Only one short message. One message that carried more weight than every legal document in the envelope. "You spent months choosing deception. Tonight, I choose honesty. The rest of my life begins now." The moment he finished reading, he knew exactly who sent it. Alora Bennett. His wife. The woman he believed remained one step behind. The woman he believed was still searching for answers. The woman who apparently knew everything. His chest tightened. His breathing became shallow. His eyes immediately scanned the room, looking, searching, trying to understand. Then he found her, standing near the entrance. Alora, calm, composed, certain. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't interested in creating a scene. She simply stood there, looking directly at him. For the first time in months, there were no secrets between them. No hidden records, no hidden trips, no hidden dinners. Everything was exposed. Rowan remained frozen. The restaurant around him continued operating normally. Servers moved between tables. Guests continued conversations. Nobody understood what was happening. Nobody realized an 11-year marriage had just reached its final moment. Across the room, Alora met his gaze. That single moment carried years of history. The financial literacy event where they met, the first coffee date, the wedding, the house, the family cookouts. the holidays, the anniversary celebrations, the promises, the trust, and finally, the betrayal. Every memory seemed to exist inside that brief exchange. Rowan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. There was nothing left to explain, nothing left to defend. The facts had already spoken. For months he had controlled the story. Now he no longer controlled anything. Brielle looked between Rowan and the woman standing near the entrance. The situation finally became clear. The secrecy was over. The double life was over. The excuses were over. Everything was over. Alora gave a small nod. No speech, no accusations, no dramatic confrontation. She had no interest in arguing. The evidence had already won. The truth had already won. Then she turned around and started walking toward the exit. Rowan immediately pushed back his chair. Alora. The word never reached her. She kept walking, steady, confident, focused. For months, she had carried confusion. For months, she had carried doubt. For months, she had carried heartbreak. Tonight, she carried none of those things. Tonight, she carried certainty. The restaurant doors opened, then closed behind her. Just like that, she was gone. Rowan stood motionless. The envelope remained in his hands. The divorce papers remained in front of him. For the first time since the affair began, he faced the full weight of his choices. Not the excitement, not the secrecy, not the fantasy, the consequences. And unlike the lies he had been telling himself for nearly a year, these consequences were real. Outside, Alora stepped into the evening air. For a moment, she looked up at the Charlotte skyline. The pain wasn't gone. The disappointment wasn't gone. But something else had finally disappeared. Uncertainty. She no longer needed answers. She no longer needed explanations. She no longer needed permission to move forward. Everything she needed was already in her possession. The truth, the evidence, and her future. As she walked toward her car, she understood something important. The hardest part of her journey was finally over. Rowan Whitaker's reckoning had just begun. The weeks after the restaurant incident felt strange for Alora Bennett. Not because life stopped, because life kept moving. Every morning arrived on schedule. Bills still needed paying. Work still demanded attention. Clients still needed guidance. The world did not stop because her marriage ended. At first, that reality felt difficult. Later, it became comforting. Life was giving her permission to move forward. The divorce process continued exactly as Corinne Vale predicted. Professional, organized, direct. There were legal meetings, financial discussions, paperwork, deadlines, important decisions. None of it was enjoyable, but every completed step brought Alora closer to a new beginning. The emotional recovery proved harder. One morning, she woke up expecting to hear Rowan moving around the house. Then she remembered that chapter was over. Another morning, she reached for her phone because she wanted to tell Rowan something funny that happened at work. Then she remembered again. Those moments appeared often, not because she missed the affair, because she missed the life she believed she had. Recognizing that difference helped her heal. A few months later, Alora started counseling with Marin Locke. The sessions quickly became important. Marin did not spend much time discussing Rowan. Instead, she focused on Alora, her choices, her growth, her future. During one session, Marin asked a question that stayed with her. What are you most disappointed about? Alora expected an easy answer. The affair, the lies, the betrayal. Instead, another answer appeared. I stopped trusting myself. Marin nodded. Explain that. There were signs. There were. I kept talking myself out of what I saw. That realization changed everything. For months, Alora blamed Rowan. Now she was examining herself too. Not because the affair was her fault. It wasn't, but she wanted to learn from the experience. She wanted to understand why she ignored her instincts for so long. That lesson became one of the most valuable parts of her recovery. Trust should not require ignoring reality. Love should not require ignoring reality. Commitment should not require ignoring reality. Once she accepted that truth, she started rebuilding confidence. Not confidence in other people, confidence in herself. The progress happened slowly, one decision at a time, one healthy choice at a time, one day at a time. Meanwhile, her work began changing too. More clients started discussing life transitions, divorce, job loss, unexpected setbacks, financial recovery, Alora noticed something interesting. Her personal experience made her better at helping others. She understood uncertainty. She understood fear. She understood rebuilding. That understanding allowed her to connect with people differently. One afternoon, a community organization invited her to teach a financial education workshop. The event was small. About 20 people attended. Alora almost declined. Then she changed her mind. The workshop exceeded every expectation. Attendees asked thoughtful questions. People stayed afterward to continue conversations. Several thanked her for making difficult topics easy to understand. One woman approached before leaving. "I needed this." The statement seemed simple, but it stayed with Alora because she realized something. The hardest chapter of her life could still help someone else. A month later, she taught another workshop, then another, then another. Attendance increased each time. Word spread throughout Charlotte. Organizations started reaching out. Churches, community groups, educational programs. The demand continued growing. Soon, helping people navigate financial challenges became more than part of her career. It became part of her mission. The work gave her energy, purpose, direction, everything she needed during recovery. Around the same time, her personal life became healthier too. She spent more time with family, more time with friends, more time doing things she enjoyed. The loneliness that once followed her through the house slowly disappeared, not overnight, but steadily. One evening, she attended a family cookout, the same type of gathering she had attended her entire life. Music played, children laughed, relatives shared stories. At one point, Aunt Vernice sat beside her. "You seem lighter." Alora smiled. "I feel lighter." That answer surprised even her, because it was true. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't carrying secrets. She wasn't carrying uncertainty. She wasn't carrying someone else's dishonesty. She was simply living. As the months passed, another realization became clear. Healing was not about forgetting. Healing was about remembering without allowing the memory to control your future. The affair would always be part of her story. The divorce would always be part of her story, but neither would define her story. That distinction mattered. One evening, after finishing another successful workshop, Alora drove home feeling grateful. The road behind her had been painful. The road ahead looked promising. Most importantly, she trusted herself again, and after everything she had endured, that felt like the greatest victory of all. By the second year after the divorce, Alora Bennett's life looked very different, not because she had forgotten the past, because she had stopped living inside it. Her workshops continued growing across Charlotte. Community centers invited her, churches invited her, local organizations invited her. Every month brought new opportunities. People trusted her because she spoke from experience. She understood what it meant to rebuild after a setback. She understood what it meant to start over. That connection made her work powerful. One Saturday morning, she attended a community education event. Her role was simple: speak about financial planning and answer questions. After finishing her presentation, she stepped away from the podium and joined the crowd. That was when she met Everett Rhodes. The introduction lasted less than 5 minutes. Nothing dramatic happened. No instant attraction, no fairy-tale moment. Just a conversation. Everett worked as a high school principal. He asked thoughtful questions, listened carefully, thanked her for the presentation, then both returned to their day. That was all. Several months later, they met again at another community event. This time, the conversation lasted longer. They talked about education, community programs, families, the challenges facing young people. When the event ended, Everett asked if she wanted coffee sometime. Alora considered the invitation carefully. For a long time, she had focused entirely on healing. Now she felt ready to open another chapter. Coffee sounds nice. The relationship developed slowly. That was exactly how Alora wanted it. No rushing, no pressure, no games, just two adults getting to know each other. Their first few dates were simple: coffee shops, walks through local parks, community events, long conversations. What impressed Alora most was Everett's consistency. If he promised to call, he called. If he promised to show up, he showed up. If he said he would do something, he did it. Those qualities seemed basic. After everything she had experienced, they felt valuable. The more time they spent together, the more she appreciated him. Everett never tried to impress people. He simply treated people well. Servers, neighbors, strangers, friends. Everyone received the same respect. That told Alora a lot about his character. Months passed. The relationship grew stronger, not because of grand gestures, because of reliability. Trust slowly returned to her life. This time, it was built carefully. One experience at a time, one conversation at a time, one promise at a time. Meanwhile, her professional life continued expanding. The workshops became so successful that Alora began exploring something bigger. She wanted to create a company dedicated to helping people navigate major financial transitions. Divorce, job loss, unexpected hardship, major life changes. The idea excited her. More importantly, it filled a genuine need. She spent months planning, researching, building partnerships, developing programs. The work required patience, but patience had become one of her strengths. Eventually, the company launched. The response exceeded expectations. People signed up for workshops. Organizations requested partnerships. Community leaders offered support. Within a short period, the company became one of the most rewarding projects of her life, not because it generated income, because it generated impact. Every success reminded her how far she had come. Years earlier, she sat at her dining room table trying to understand a betrayal. Now she spent her days helping others build stronger futures. The contrast was remarkable. While Alora's life moved forward, Rowan Whitaker's life moved in a different direction. The consequences he had avoided for so long finally began catching up to him. The relationship with Brielle Hart changed once secrecy disappeared. The excitement that once fueled their connection faded. Reality replaced fantasy. Arguments became more common. Disagreements became more frequent. The relationship faced pressures it never faced before. Without secrecy, it looked very different. Eventually, the cracks became impossible to ignore. The relationship struggled, then struggled more, then reached a point where neither person seemed happy. Rowan spent increasing amounts of time alone. For the first time, he started looking honestly at the choices he had made. That honesty arrived too late to save his marriage, but it arrived nonetheless. One evening, he found an old photograph while unpacking a storage box. The image showed a family cookout from years earlier. Alora stood beside him smiling. Friends surrounded them. Everyone looked happy. Rowan stared at the photograph longer than expected, not because he missed the past, because he finally understood what he had thrown away. Trust, friendship, partnership. The realization stayed with him. Back across Charlotte, Alora continued building a future. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She wasn't trying to win. She wasn't trying to make Rowan regret his choices. She simply focused on living well, and that decision changed everything. Because real healing had never been about getting even. It had always been about moving forward. And with Everett beside her, her business growing, and her confidence restored, Alora Bennett was finally discovering how bright the future could be when it was built on honesty. 3 years passed. 3 years after the night, a waiter placed an envelope on Rowan Whitaker's table. 3 years after Alora Bennett walked out of that restaurant. 3 years after her life changed direction. On a bright Saturday morning in Charlotte, Alora stood backstage at a financial literacy conference. The event was the largest she had ever participated in. Hundreds of people filled the conference hall. Teachers, business owners, parents, young professionals, community leaders. Many attended because they had heard about her work. Others attended because someone recommended her workshops. Either way, the room was full. A volunteer approached. "They're ready for you." Alora smiled. "Thank you." She walked onto the stage. The audience applauded warmly. For the next hour, she spoke about financial recovery, not just money, life, resilience, preparation, starting over after difficult seasons. The audience listened closely. People took notes. Some nodded as she spoke. Others smiled. Many saw parts of their own experiences in her story. By the time she finished, the room erupted into applause. Dozens of attendees lined up afterward to thank her. Some wanted advice. Others wanted resources. Many simply wanted to say thank you. As the crowd slowly thinned, Alora noticed a familiar face near the back of the room. Rowan. For the first time in years, they stood in the same place again. The sight surprised her. Nothing more, no anger, no bitterness, no sadness, just surprise. Rowan waited until the crowd dispersed. Then he approached. Time had changed him. The confidence he once carried so easily seemed quieter now. Life had clearly taught him a few lessons of its own. "Hi, Alora." "Hello, Rowan." He glanced around the conference hall. "You've built something incredible." "Thank you." The compliment sounded sincere, not forced, not awkward, just honest. Rowan nodded. "I didn't realize how much you've accomplished." Alora smiled politely. "It's been a busy few years." "It looks like it." For a moment, they talked about the conference, the workshops, the company, the community programs. Then Rowan became serious. "I owe you something." Alora already knew where the conversation was heading. Still, she listened. "I should have apologized years ago." His voice remained steady. "No excuses." He shook his head. "I spent a long time blaming everything except myself." Alora said nothing. She allowed him to continue. "The truth is simple." Rowan looked directly at her. "I made selfish decisions." "Yes." "I hurt someone who didn't deserve it." "Yes." "And I destroyed something valuable." For the first time, Alora saw complete accountability. No blame, no justification, no attempt to rewrite history. Just honesty, the kind that should have arrived years earlier. Rowan exhaled. "I'm sorry." Alora nodded. "Thank you." And she meant it, not because the apology changed the past, because accepting responsibility still mattered, even late. A few minutes later, their conversation ended. No dramatic reconciliation, no emotional reunion, no second chance. That chapter had closed long ago. Rowan wished her well. Alora wished him well. Then they went their separate ways. As Rowan walked toward the exit, he glanced back one last time. He saw attendees gathering around Alora again, asking questions, sharing stories, laughing with her. He finally understood something he should have understood years ago. He hadn't lost a marriage. He had lost a remarkable partner. The realization stayed with him as he disappeared through the conference hall doors. Several months later, another important day arrived, a much happier one. Family gathered at a large backyard celebration. Children ran through the grass. Music played. Food covered long tables. Relatives filled folding chairs. The scene looked very familiar. The same type of family gathering Alora had enjoyed since childhood. Celeste Bennett moved through the crowd greeting guests. Darnell Bennett laughed with relatives near the grill. Sadia helped organize food. Aunt Vernice observed everything as usual. And Everett Rhodes fit comfortably among all of them. That mattered, because nobody had forced him into the family. He earned his place through consistency, through respect, through kindness, through time. Late that afternoon, Everett asked Alora to walk with him. She immediately noticed his nervous smile. "You've been planning something." "Maybe." They reached a quieter corner of the yard. Friends and family watched from a distance. Everett took a deep breath. Then he spoke from the heart. He talked about partnership, trust, respect, the future they were building together, the life they shared. Then he asked the question everyone already expected. "Alora Bennett, will you marry me?" Cheers erupted before she even answered. Alora laughed. Tears filled her eyes. Not because she needed someone to rescue her, not because she needed another marriage to prove anything, because she was choosing love from a position of strength. "Yes." The celebration exploded around them. Family members hugged them. Friends congratulated them. Children continued playing without understanding why the adults suddenly became emotional. And for Alora, that moment represented something much bigger than an engagement. It represented healing. Years later, on a quiet evening, Alora sat at a dining room table. A different table, a different home, a different life. Across from her sat Everett. They talked about weekend plans, family visits, community projects, ordinary things, the kind of ordinary moments that once seemed unremarkable. Now they felt precious, because she understood something many people learn the hard way. Ignoring your instincts has a cost. Preparation is stronger than revenge. Self-worth cannot depend on another person's loyalty. A broken marriage does not mean a broken future. Growth is the real victory. Rowan spent a year choosing deception and lost the life he valued most. Alora chose honesty, preparation, and self-respect. That choice gave her a future better than anything she imagined during her darkest days. And in the end, that changed everything. As we wrap up today's story, let us know in the comments. If you were in Alora's position, would you have confronted Rowan immediately, or would you have handled it the way she did? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps more people discover stories that remind us how resilience, self-respect, and honesty can change a life. Thank you for spending this time with us here on Mr. Brugman Stories. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next story.